In this lecture, we're going to talk about a couple of different ways that non-Western societies prefer to resolve conflict. Um, these are literally just going to be introductions to these ideas. I would not propose to think that just these few things you will know how to function in these two methods, but it's letting you know these methods exist. And as you move into opportunities where you're working in a cross cultural environment, the fact that you know these exist, then you would be able to explore how does that particular cultural group do these things? Because these are generalizable to the point where almost every non Western culture uses these methods in one way or another. So the first one I want to talk about is mediators. And mediators is very common. People in the majority world commonly use mediators to resolve conflict. When there's a significant conflict, they're immediately referred to a third party, a person who is older, or wiser, or neutral, or a trusted member of the community. And the mediator avoids a face-to-face confrontation, therefore minimizing the possibility of loss of face, shame, or dishonor to both parties. Um, Sometimes both parties know there's a conflict and they agree on a mediator. On occasion, one party will have something that they're holding against another group, then the other person doesn't know they're holding against it. They will send a mediator to represent them and tell what it is that they're bothered about, and then the person on the other end has a chance to respond. I walked through that at least once while serving in Latvia. Of a person coming to me and having tea and discussing. And on the discussion, they brought up that, well, this person they were concerned because they asked for help with this and you refused. And I didn't realize it, but I had offended someone. And that mediator, he didn't come to me and say, "You offended me." He sent someone else who could quietly deal with that. So, the textbook, which is The Cross Cultural Conflict by Dwayne Elmer, provides several really good illustrations to this. Um, I'll just go over them real quickly. One of them was when they were serving, no, a friend of theirs was serving in a Muslim country. After they moved into a home, they discovered that the call to prayer, the loudspeaker for the call to prayer, faced directly at their apartment window. It was like 18 feet outside the window, and it faced directly toward their children's window. And the problem is one of the calls to prayer happens in the evening, and it was at a time just within 30 minutes after their children tried to lay down to go to sleep. And so they would take the time to put their children to bed, allow the children to go to sleep, and then the loudspeaker would come on. And if you've ever been around that, it's jarring. And he had learned, he had learned about using a mediator. And so he began to think about who could he speak to about this. And so it turned out that there was a person who was who worked security for the ministry that they were involved in. And he decided to go to them. And again, he was very careful. He did not say, "This loudspeaker is making our life unbearable and we can't stand this and something has to be done." And we just, when this person, as the common thing was, they would ask, "How was your day and how is your family?" And he would say, he just said, "Well, it's very difficult because my children, they are not sleeping well." "Oh, that is so sad to hear." And then he would say, "Yes, it seems that after they try to go to bed in the evening, that at that moment, at the time that the call to prayer comes, it seems very loud and our children are unable to sleep. And sometimes for some time afterward, they're unable to go back to sleep." And so he just told this little story, not accusing anyone of doing anything wrong, but just saying that they're having difficulty. This person, it turned out that they were a person who was a friend of the person who led the call to prayer. And he actually went to that person and, in a very gentle way, expressed the fact that within a couple of weeks, they found that the call to prayer was still happening, but they had faced the speaker away from them. And so now it was possible for the children to sleep through it. So they used this indirect method. They didn't accuse anyone. They used a mediator, and they were able to get some resolution. Another one was a family that was serving in an African country, and the kids, of course, were the only white kids around, and they had often been picked on, or they were called names. Occasionally, they would be the mean kids would find out where they're walking home, and they would stand on the side of the road and shout insults at them or throw sticks at them or whatever else. And the couple was very upset by this, of course. And so, but again, someone had trained them about using a mediator. And so rather than going to the school and demand that they take action, I want to know who these kids are, I want them stopped. Rather than doing that, um, they every day they had to go to the market, and while they're in the market, there's always conversation going on in this African nation. And one day that she became aware of the fact that the butcher, the one who sold the meat, was the oldest and most respected member of that community, of that basically of that community that operated the market. And one day he spoke to her and said, "How are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm very sad." "Why would you be sad? It's a wonderful day, beautiful weather. Why are you sad?" She said, "Well, I'm sad because my children are sad." "Oh, why are your children sad?" "Well, it seems that they've been having some difficulty, that they do not feel that the children are accepting them. They feel that that they cannot find friends because the children here are not accepting them, and they're sometimes saying some things that are cruel to them, and it makes my heart very sad." And so in reality, that man was aware that the community was losing face. The community was losing face because this couple was was being harmed, and they were being offended. And so throughout the rest of the day, when people would come to the shop and they would ask the butcher, "How are you today?" "Oh, it is a wonderful day, but my heart is heavy." "Oh, why is your heart heavy?" "Because I spoke to our guests, our foreign guests, and we this is what has been happening. It's very sad. Can you believe this?" And it spread throughout the entire community. And over the process of several days, it spread the community. And within a few weeks, the children stopped calling them names, and the still children stopped throwing sticks at them, and it all changed because they realized that they were bringing disgrace on the entire community. And so rather than coming at the people and forcing them to become defensive, they were able to use an indirect means to communicate this and communicate their sorrow and their heartbrokenness that made the community as a whole had to respond in a way so that they did not lose face. And so that's what it means to use a mediator. Just very simply, when you're dealing with a conflict, the two people or groups are in conflict. Um, they choose a third party, a mediator, to work between them. Sometimes that is done with both parties knowing about it and agreeing to it. Sometimes, more like these stories that I told and the experience that I had, one of the members, the offended member, finds someone who is a person of influence that they can tell. And again, you see the second one, very gently and very indirectly tell the story of what's going on, tell the story of the complaint about the other person or some action that they took, but in a way that is never accusatory, in a way that's never harsh, but just explaining to this mediator what is weighing upon them. And then the mediator, and once again, sometimes the mediator goes directly to the other party. That was my experience. The mediator came to me. The mediator goes to the other party. Sometimes they work indirectly, like the butcher. He didn't go to right to the parents of these children. He just kind of spread it through the community. You see, once again, already my brain is thinking an American. Well, they're just using gossip. They're just using gossip. Why would they use gossip? It's like, got to get your American brain turned off. This is how it works in their culture. Indirectly, he communicated with the entire community that this was happening. He never said who was doing it. He never said anybody. He never called any child's name. He never called any parent's name. He just says this is happening. And as the community became aware it was happening, they dealt with it. And so then the other party, if it's a direct situation, the other party has their turn to respond. They can either respond and say things back, or they can correct the problem and make them aware that the problem has been corrected. And either way, the mediator is going to return to the first person. They will either explain that the person apologized and they were sorry for that they didn't intend to do this way, or they might say the other person saw it this way. But again, it's always indirect, it's always subtle, and it's very slow. And this is one of the things that drive Americans crazy. And that last thing, little by little, a resolution is reached. You're not going to solve a problem with a mediator in a week. It's going to take a long time to solve a problem with a mediator. And you're just going to have to be patient with that. And of course, by a long time, it might take a week. Something we would resolve in one conversation and move on. It might take a week. It might take a month. It might take several months to resolve the conflict. But usually, and this is what in the situation I had when I became aware of it, usually there's an exchange of gifts or the sharing of a meal that symbolizes the resolution of the conflict. And once I finally took me a while, I did not respond as I should at first. It took me a while to figure out what was going on. I actually sent along a little gift to them and told them how much I appreciated them and appreciated their ministry, and that giving of a gift or maybe the sharing of a meal symbolizes the resolution. It's not a bribe. It's not buying their forgiveness, and those are accusations that our Western brains try to make. It is just the way they do it. You give a little gift, and that gift symbolizes, I am saying to you that I feel that we should be on good terms again. And so this giving of gifts is all part of the process. So this using a mediator is a slow process, and it's difficult for Americans to do. A few important characteristics of an official mediator: they need to be someone who's respected, someone who is at least somewhat neutral. Now, it's not going to be 100% neutral, because if you're a foreigner and you're dealing with a situation within a culture, you're already immediately going to be, they're going to know more about their culture than they are yours. So you're going to have to deal with that a little bit. But somebody you can trust to weigh out the fairness and the resolution of a conflict. They have to be trusted by both parties. Eventually, if you don't trust the mediator, then you might have to suggest another mediator some way. And they have to have some sort of power. They have to have some sort of situation where, either through influence of their position or their status, or whether it's a financial influence that they have, that there has to be somebody, they have to be somebody that can, if the both parties, and that's if one party refuses to cooperate, they need to fear the fact that that mediator can say, look, this person is still bringing disgrace on our community because they're refusing to accept and cooperate this. And so an official mediator is going to be a person, and strangely enough, one of the illustrations I told you, it was the butcher. It wasn't the president, it wasn't the mayor, it was the butcher. But he had status and role, and he carried weight in what he was doing there. And it might be a weight that not everybody was aware of, but the community certainly was. So using a mediator is one means. And there's another means, and once again, I'm just going to kind of describe this to you and just kind of use an illustration or so, but this is the method called one down, the one down method. And what that one down position is, this idea of making yourself vulnerable to another person. You indicate to that person that without their help, you are in danger of losing face. So this is a situation where something is going on and you're being taken advantage of or something like that. And you express to another person that you're in danger of losing face, and you're putting themselves out there and putting yourself in debt and obligation to them and calling on them for assistance. And so this whole thing is a little bit of a twist on the shame and loss of face culture, but is a powerful tool that can be used. A little more details about it. In these cultures, it's important for you not to lose face and be ashamed. But if you are in danger of this happening to you, you can call on another person to help protect you from losing face. In fact, in some of these situations, it's my brain just doesn't even work this way. But you can call on the very person who is endangering your honor, and call on them to save you from shame that would befall you. And they're the one causing it. But if a person, and this is a cultural dynamic, if a person holds the power to keep another person from being shamed, they become morally obligated to do something to keep that from happening. They have become morally obligated. Again, the illustration will help in just a second. But just understand that if a person becomes aware that some action of theirs might cause another person to be dishonored, and they don't act to serve that person's honor, they then are in danger of losing face and being shamed themselves. And so this cultural game, and other classes, other books that talk about this issue of cultural games, and this whole thing about face and losing face and saving face is a cultural game that is just, it's a foreign game to us. It's outside our normal purview. And so it's really hard for us to get it. But the illustration that found in this book as well, I'm going to actually read a portion of it. But there was a man there was a missionary who had several of his friends who were coming together for a gathering. And since it was a large gathering, oftentimes you're able to negotiate a price for a 5-course meal for a large gathering, kind of like we would do if we were doing catering for an event or something. But he was able to negotiate a price with the owner of this particular restaurant that was a very good restaurant. And he negotiated the price, and they agreed upon the price. And then since they negotiated the price and agreed upon the price within the culture with this particular thing, each member of the party contributed a certain amount to cover this large meal that they were going to have together. And so they have had the meal, they've gone together, they've had all the food and stuff, and then the waiter brings the bill. And the bill was considerably higher, like twice as much as they had agreed upon. Now, again, my American Western motif is, well, I'm not going to stand for this. Get that manager out here. We're going to have the talk. Would not work in this culture. You would break relationship. You would be considered overly emotional. You would be the one who would have embarrassed yourself. So the author literally wrote this, and I just literally want to write this. And he said he asked the manager would come out because there's a large party. The manager came out and asked, "Have you enjoyed the evening?" And he stepped aside and spoke to the manager privately and said, "Yes, it's been a great success. The food was wonderful, but there is a slight difficulty, and I am feeling quite embarrassed." And again, the manager asked about the cause of this embarrassment. Don responded, "I am so embarrassed and ashamed because I thought the price of the eating was going to be this amount. But now I find out it's much more expensive than I thought. I collected this amount from all of my friends who came thinking that this would be sufficient to cover the bill. Now the bill is much more than I expected, and I don't have the money to pay the extra myself. It will be very humiliating to ask my friends to pay more than I told them that they would have to pay. They've enjoyed this evening so much here at your restaurant. It will be such a shame. I will be ashamed if I have to ask them for more money." Okay, before I read on, I want to see here. He was going to be shamed because he was going to have to ask his party guests for more money. The person causing the shame was the restaurant owner. So he put himself in the position of one down by saying, "I'm going to be shamed. You can rescue me." So rather than accusing him, rather than going at him, instead he said, "I'm going to be shamed, but you can help me." He didn't ever ask, "Can you help me?" He just made the statement, the indirect statement of what was going on. And then the manager sympathized with Don's dilemma, took the bill back to his office. In a few minutes he returned and said, "Will this help you, Mr. Collins?" The new total was considerably less, just a few dollars different from the original, because again, if he made it exactly the amount they agreed upon, he would have to be admitting that he deceived him, which would cause him to lose face. So he had to make it maybe $10 more so that it looks, so it's all a game. The whole thing is a game. It's so hard for us to play games, but it is a game, and you have to learn to play the game. But in the end, he saved face. The missionary saved face. Everyone left happy, and the relationship continued. And that's what matters in non-Western conflict resolution. So, as I said, this issue of using mediators, this idea of using this one-down method, it's not natural for us, very unnatural for us. They are learned processes that we have to get used to using. And so, again, when we look at those type of situations, we have to be reminded again that we have preferred ways to handle conflict and resolve it. We talked about that at the beginning of this section. It is not our calling to change their cultural views on conflict management. You are not going to go to Thailand, and I believe that story I just told you took place in Thailand. You are not going to go to Thailand and teach them the right way to handle conflict. Just stay home. If that's what you're going to do, just stay home. You're not going to do it. You're just going to embarrass yourself. You're going to embarrass other people you work with. So it's not your calling to change the cultural views on conflict, and you're not going to accomplish it. Now, if we find some things going on that are deeply unscriptural, things that abuse the weak or abuse the poor, I mean, if we see something going on in a specific situation and we can see that those who are already disadvantaged are being disadvantaged, we can use scripture to give a biblical response, because the Bible was written. I mean, it's these two forms I just mentioned to you of conflict resolution, they're in the scriptures. They're not taught in the scriptures, but there are illustrations in the scriptures where you see these indirect forms of conflict resolution. And the scriptures, because of that, also address the potential abuses of these very things. So we can provide biblical responses to those negative elements, and we need to do so within our own culture as well. And we have to be aware that most ways of resolving conflict are ethically neutral. Okay? We have not found the right and best and most holy way of resolving conflict. Our way of resolving conflict is our way of resolving conflict. It is not best. It is not worst. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. It's not good or bad. It just is what it is. And their way of resolving conflict is what it is. So we have to be the ones, as we're going into their cultures, we have to be the ones to adjust and to learn culturally meaningful ways to resolve conflicts. We have to be those people. I would say even within our own culture, within our own country, if you want to be effective with working with people who are from other cultures, you will learn some of these methods, this indirect communication, this speaking around the problem, this saving face and inviting someone to help you to save face, to make you partnering with them instead of fighting with them. So those are really, really important. And so I hope that this has helped to introduce the idea of conflict resolution and the idea of cross-cultural conflict and resolution. This is an introduction. You will find out more about it. You will learn more about it. And when you go into a new culture, find someone else, find another Westerner there who has walked in this, and ask them about this. How do you resolve conflict here? What do I need to do? What do I need to avoid doing? And you have to retrain your brain to be able to do these things, giving up what's important to you and taking on what's important to them.